I think this is important to explain, too. I was saying that we may seem like the glass half empty, either me or the board. And the reason is when you're trying to get this change moving, what you have to do is not only have change, but you have to accelerate the pace of change. We're trying to change the whole rhythm of how we do business and speed it up. And for that reason, we tend to be driving and talking about what isn't done yet. And that's not what I want to do this morning. You know, the handout that you've got, does everybody have the handout now? The reason I did that from a handout, I was talking to Dr. Choi and to Cindy about what our highlights would be, and I want to hit a couple of things. But the highlights aren't really fair, and they don't really capture what has been accomplished. This is 11 pages of accomplishments, some of them really quite startling in higher education and in the university and in this university. And this tells the story in a way that no one talk or a few slides can ever do it. The people at this university have worked so hard under such, in many ways, pressures and have accomplished so much that I hope that each of you will at least take time to look to some way at this really remarkable document. And I'm not going to talk about names except one, because I could signal out a few names, and we have some heroes in this transformation. But again, that's not fair, because everything you see has been accomplished by the whole university family. And I do see one of my dear friends here, but I promise not to mention a name, but that includes alums. The accomplishments of this university is every person, every staff, every faculty, every administrator, every executive, the board members, and the alums who have all put such effort into where we are today and comparing this to where we were a few years ago. The reason I won't mention names is I have one name to mention. A lot of us saw this really remarkable thing last Saturday at the football game when Professor George Smith, which is the one name I'm going to mention today, took the field, having received the Nobel Prize in chemistry, really one of the really great accomplishments in the long history of this great university. And when I was walking down with him, I said, "Congratulations, Professor Smith." And he said to me, "I didn't do it alone." Now think of that. He said, "I didn't do it alone." And nothing that we accomplished, nothing we can accomplish will ever be accomplished without everybody being on the team. There are a few things I want to bring out, though, to really highlight. One of the real concerns that we had in this university a few years ago was our very broken relationship with Missouri and with Missouri politics and with Missouri citizens. All that has changed. Let's talk, we were a punchline in campaigns and by people in office for a while. We've now got to the point that Governor Parson has written a letter praising us for the movement we've made and the vision of excellence. The legislature now, instead of being the one that everybody wanted to pick on, and don't think that there weren't other institutions of higher education who weren't aware of that, we're back to having the command and the respect of every member of the legislature, including those who represent other four-years. And that took a lot of hard work by a lot of people. The student affordability, in the middle of these fights over student affordability and our budget being threatened, I want you to think about some of the things that have occurred. We have at Mizzou, the new scholarship program. We've opened up access to hundreds and thousands even of students. By going to the Common App, our applications are up throughout the university, over 20%. You're going to hear some things today about textbooks, lowering the cost for students in textbooks. We've dealt with room and board issues. We have addressed head-on issues that other universities are trying to address and have not done as well as we have, and we've done it when we were under pressure. And it's really been an amazing accomplishment. I want to say a few things about what kind of, I never did think that the 2015 was what put us in trouble. I thought we were fragile, but 2015 received a lot of press. Kevin McDonald and Alex Cartwright will be speaking soon because the American Council on Education, did I get that right, issued a report. And what we've always said has happened. We are now an example of best practices to the nation of how to deal with some of society's problems. And I want you to think what that took to accomplish. The finance and how we handle it has totally changed. I do want to signal out UMKC and UMSL, who were under tremendous pressures, who have totally revamped some of their budgeting. It was very difficult to do. But we've gone to a 5-year plan for capital improvements. Now again, if you think this should have been easy, this university, and I don't say this to fault anyone who went before us because the world was different, but this university never had the courage to make real decisions. What we did with capital improvements was pick a bunch of everybody's favorite projects, throw them at the legislature and say, whatever you do is great with us. And it was not strategic, and it led us to significant problems. We were afraid of the politics of the 4 university campuses. We've now not only instituted a 5-year financial planning, but we've made the Transitional Precision Medicine Center, which I think will be renamed to where even I can pronounce it, our #1 priority. And we've done that in a way that can not only change the University of Missouri at Columbia, can change all 4 university campuses, can change the state of Missouri. We couldn't have done that 5 years ago and 6 years ago because we as an institution couldn't make that decision as to what our #1 priority was. Now, I know it's unbelievable, but it's true. We've gone to the new strategic way of spending money. Tremendous work was put in by the task force this year to try to clarify the roles and responsibilities of our different officers, different employees in the faculty. And that wasn't done, I think some people misunderstand it, to create authority. That's not how we operate at a university. What it was done was to create a line of ownership and responsibility so that those people who are on board with the transformation and change can be identified, and frankly, so those people who are not on board with transformation and accountability can also be identified. And as a result, the system now is putting in hundreds of millions of dollars into strategic initiatives, into the TPMC, into online learning. We are finally making progress at changing how we provide our services to the state of Missouri and do our part for the development of the workforce of the 21st century. A tremendous change. Again, I don't want to go through too much of this because I don't want you all to think I'm signaling anybody of the team, anybody out. You know, things like Missouri S&T being identified as a highly selective university, well, that's a tremendous accomplishment for all of us that are here today on all 4 university campuses. Academic affairs focus on new open educational resources. Is that an announcement today, Steve? I mean, you're going to hear a tremendous accomplishment by academic affairs today. Our marketing has stepped up to a whole new level. So again, what I want to say here is the glass is way more than half full. I will go back to saying it's half empty tomorrow or later today, but it is way more than half full. The accomplishments that you all have made has really made this the university we want it to be. We have a lot farther to go, but frankly, right now, I would say to my fellow board members that we ought to give a round of applause to them for these accomplishments. Please take this home with you. Dudley, get this out to the public. All right. Now, moving on, I got to find my revised agenda, which is my fault. We're to President Choi's report, and we have a number of things later in critical issues to talk about.
So Chairman Steelman, thank you very much for sharing with us all of the accomplishments that we made together. That could not have been, these accomplishments would not have been possible without the people that I'm looking at in front of me. These are not only the senior academic leaders, but also the faculty and staff who truly believe in the mission of this university. And I do want to thank you and your leadership with the board in ensuring that we have a strategic focus on doing the things that are important for our university. So Chairman Steelman, thank you. So let me move on to the presentation. And we have a number of new administrators who've joined the university, who've joined new leadership teams. First of all, Elizabeth Laboa is now the Vice Chancellor for Strategic Partnerships, in addition to her role as the Dean of Engineering at Mizzou. Bill Turpin is the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor for Economic Development, working at Mizzou, but also supporting the system. Rick Baniak, in addition to his role as the CFO at UMSL, is now the Chief Transformation Officer, working with all four universities to ensure that transformations happen with a sense of urgency. That's critical. So Rick, thank you. And we have two brand new people to the university. First is Paul Herring. Paul, can you stand up for a second? Paul is the Vice Chancellor for University Advancement here at UMSL. He starts on December 3rd. Currently, he is the Vice President for Advancement at Texas Tech, where he has led the $1 billion campaign. So we expect the same level of success here. We're a bigger city than Lubbock, Texas. But Paul, welcome. Welcome to the university. Next is Kimiko Black Gilmore, who has been selected as a Chief of Staff to our new Chancellor at UMKC, Molly Agarwal. And Kimiko recently served as the Deputy City Manager at Kansas City. I don't believe she is here, but she's going to do an outstanding job transforming the university in Kansas City. So earlier today during breakfast, we had a chance to listen to some outstanding presentations by graduate students at UMSL. They were inspiring, they were enthusiastic, and if they are the hope for our future, I know that our future is going to be very bright. And that is why it's important for us that during every board meeting, for us to talk about the 5 compacts where appropriate for the Missouri Compacts. The first is student success. But in order for us to have student success, we need to have students. So I want to talk a little bit about enrollment. Enrollment management data for in-state and out-of-state for first-time freshmen, and we're looking at fall of 2019 matriculants compared to fall of 2018. And if you look across the board, we have increases at Mizzou to 9% overall increase in applications. Compare this to almost a 15% increase last year. So we're moving in a very positive direction. At UMKC, Chancellor Agarwal as well as Provost Bickelmeyer are working on revamping the enrollment management program, but we expect to see higher increases with the new marketing plans and the scholarships that they're going to announce more in the future. S&T is up 8.8%. I think being highly selective has really increased the attractiveness of attending Missouri S&T. And here at UMSL, we're up 2.4%. Now, while some of the campuses are up, none of us are really satisfied with where we are. We want to grow that even more. But I have to thank the hardworking people in enrollment management who are doing things, going about their business in a new and innovative way for us to be able to see the increases that we're seeing. Another very positive development is that we are reducing the time that it takes to admit students based on when they apply. And if you look at all 4 campuses, we are admitting students into our programs at a much faster rate. Now that helps because the earlier that they are admitted, we can provide them with scholarship information, and then students are more interested then in accepting the offer that we provided. So these are all very positive. Now when it comes to looking at the accepted students, these are students who send in a deposit to say, yes, we are going to attend. Look at the growth at Mizzou, 33% compared to last year. That is very positive. Now, the other 3 universities, we have some work to do, but we are going to be actively increasing the rate of acceptances so that we can better predict what our finances are going to be in the following year. Also, another very important measure for student success is in the graduation rates. If we look at the graduation rate trends over the past 3 years, and these are 6-year graduation rates, which is the national norm for evaluating graduation rates. And the last column indicates the 2023 targets as part of our strategic plan. And so we are making good progress, but as you can see, we need to accelerate that growth. Now, you can't increase graduation rate if we don't increase year-to-year retention rate. So that's going to be a very important measure as we're going to move forward. Now, I put graduation rates as one of my key metrics for accomplishments as part of my evaluation, annual evaluation. And that's because it is that important to a university. So I'll be working closely with the chancellors at each university to ensure that year over year, our retention rates as well as our graduation rates are increased. And as you can see, we still have a long ways to go to accomplish the goals of 2023. This is a 6-year graduation rate for the entire population of first-time students. If we look at it for Pell students, you can see that we have even more work to do. We owe it to students who we accept into our university to ensure that they graduate on time, and graduate with lower debt so that they can be successful. In each of our universities, we are at least 12% behind where we need to be in 2023. We need to accelerate our approach for not only financial aid, more financial aid, but also mentoring, coaching, advising, experiential opportunities to engage our students so they are successful towards graduation. Just last week, Chancellor Agarwal announced the first of our Promise and Opportunity Scholarship matches. Working with the KC Scholars Program, which has a close connection to the Kauffman Foundation, they announced a $20 million scholarship program with $10 million from KC Scholars and $10 million from the university. They'll be able to support 400 students by providing each student a guarantee of $50,000, 5 years to graduate, and $10,000 for this program. When Chancellor Agarwal visited the schools and shared with the students that they've been selected for this program, the emotions ran very high. And it really reinforced why we are in the business that we're in, to provide access and opportunity to a high quality education by making that education affordable. And so we're going to see more of these programs coming forward. In fact, Chancellor Agarwal said, stay tuned. On December 11th, there will be another announcement, and we're looking forward to that as well. Yesterday, we had a strategy session with Ernst & Young Parthenon to talk about our distance learning strategy development. As part of that, we have a goal to become the premier institution in Missouri that provides high-quality e-learning opportunities for adult learners and traditional students to meet the workforce needs of Missouri. That's a tall order. Consider that Arizona State currently has 25,000 students in Arizona State University Online, and they did that in 8 years. We want to do this in 5 years, which means that we have to be more strategic, act with a sense of urgency, and also collaborate across the campuses to achieve this goal. I want to thank Steve Graham. Currently, he's been designated as the e-learning czar for the university. We appreciate that very much. And he has worked with all 4 universities' provosts to develop a $20 million proposal to the state to train adult learners using high-quality e-learning initiatives. So, Steve, thank you. I'm very excited about the next opportunity, but before I get into this, I have to thank the many faculty members who stepped up and said, yes, we can do more to support our students in reducing the cost of attendance. And a significant component of cost of attendance is in textbooks. Typically, textbooks cost, on average, $1,200 for a freshman student per year. That is a high number. That is a number that makes students think twice about purchasing books that they absolutely need to be successful. And Steve Graham, Jill Wood, as well as Jana Moore from the system have worked very closely with many members of the university community, including Sherry Pollard, as well as Dale Sanders, to develop the types of programs that we need across all 4 universities. Just this past year, we became an OpenStax.edu major university partner, and we announced a partnership with McGraw-Hill to reduce the cost of course materials to $40 per course. And today, we have an exciting new partnership with Cengage. Cengage is the largest textbook distributor in the United States. And today we have the good fortune of having with us Mr. Kevin Stone, who's the Executive Vice President, to discuss this new partnership. So, Kevin?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Choi. Hi, I'm Kevin Stone. I am Chief Sales and Marketing Officer at Cengage. Cengage is the largest U.S.-based education and technology company in the college course materials market. We have other lines of business. We service the K-12 business. We service the library business. We are a global company. We service all markets globally. We've got about 5,000 employees worldwide, 4,000 of them in the U.S. This partnership that we're embarking on is very innovative. We launched Cengage Unlimited just about 6 months ago, and this is the first institutional system-wide partnership of its kind. We are very excited about it for so many of the reasons being discussed so far. All of those key metrics around retention and graduation rates, we think we can play a key role in driving those metrics in the direction that you and the leadership team here wants to drive them. The course materials business not long ago was called the textbook business, and when I came into it, that's what it was all about. These days, it's much more than textbooks. It's courseware, it's ebooks, it can really play a key role in student success. And the affordability piece, frankly, we've been part of the problem historically. We had to face this problem head on. Not long ago, our textbooks were $300 a piece, and students wouldn't buy them, and they would skip classes. They would not enroll in school due to the cost issues. And we faced this head on by completely flipping our business model to this subscription. We call it Cengage Unlimited, and the students get access to all of our course materials, everything in our database, the courseware, the ebooks. They can even get a hard copy if they choose. So, we think this partnership works on so many levels: content, technology, services. We are so excited about it. It's highly innovative, and we will do everything in our power to ensure a smooth implementation. And I want to thank you very much for working with us. We're very excited about what the future holds for you, your students, your faculty. Thank you very much.
Kevin, thank you. Kevin, if you can stay.
Sure.
I have one question, because I heard you say that this institution and you just did a first in the nation operation.
That's exactly correct. For a system-wide implementation like this is the very first one we've done. We are so excited to work at all levels of the institution, the individual faculty member making a decision, a department chair making a decision, but for a complete system like University of Missouri to go all in on this model with us is an absolute first for us. We're thrilled about it, and we're going to do everything in our power to ensure it is exceptional.
First sounds good to me. Huh?
First is great.
First sounds good. So, Kevin, what do you expect the savings to be for our system students through this partnership?
Well, we estimate close to $3 million a year will be saved by the current sort of cohort of students that are using our products. That savings can go up over time. That savings can increase based on the overall usage and the decisions that the individual faculty members make. But that early estimate is based on the current enrollment levels, $3 million a year.
$3 million a year. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kevin.
My pleasure.
Let me ask Sherry Pollard, Dale Sanders, Christy Allmeyer, Stephanie Easton, and Tim Grummage, if you're here, to stand. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work. These are our colleagues from the bookstore. Imagine, they're reducing, well, some say that you are actually pricing yourself out of business, but we thank you for what you do for our students. So thank you very much. Now, let me also ask our faculty members from UMSL who've adopted open, educational, and affordable resources for our students. If you're here, please stand and be recognized. They're busy developing their online resources, so thank you. All right, let me move on quickly. In research and creative works, we're going to look at some of the developments that have occurred in our extramural research grant. We have 4 public research universities, and I share the data not as a point of concern, but of a point in which we need to better understand how to improve our performance. So let's first take a look at research awards. Research awards are very important because they are a leading indicator to research expenditures. Research expenditures are the most important metrics that we have when it comes to being assessed as a public research university. At Mizzou, we've seen a 16.4% increase. Now the goal by 2023 is to have a 100% increase. So we need to continue this path of growth. But at UMKC and Missouri S&T, we've seen a reduction. Now, this is only for the first quarter of this fiscal year. There's a timing issue. There are some proposals that were due this time last year that are not yet due now. So this is early on, but it's also an impetus for the chancellors and the provost and the vice chancellor for research to examine the numbers, but also be more proactive in developing the types of proposal opportunities and support for the faculty. And this is also something that is in my evaluation, research performance. And I'm going to work very closely with the chancellors to ensure that we have growth in these areas. There's nothing more important than graduation rates and research expenditures for a public research university. In terms of current expenditures, we see some increases in UMKC and UMSL, and at Mizzou, it has been relatively flat. S&T has seen a small decrease, but this is only for the first quarter. I plan to share this information with the board during every board meeting, as well as our monthly dashboards that we make available to the board members. In terms of proposals, which is the leading indicator, we see an increase at Mizzou, reductions in UMKC, and Chancellor Agarwal and I had a conversation about how to proactively increase the proposals that are coming out from UMKC. And at the other two, there's also a slight reduction, which we need to consider reversing. And the last column, once again, is the 2023 target, where we expect to double research at Mizzou within 5 years, and that the other 3 universities increase research expenditures by 50%. Some positive news. We are very fortunate to have some of the world's leading experts in not opioid addiction, but what is now termed poison prevention. And I learned this from a symposium that we had on Wednesday when we brought some of our best social and behavioral scientists to UMSL for a summit. And Professor Rachel Winograd from UMSL and Professor Holly Hagel from UMKC together have received more than $36 million in grants during the past 2 years to support this activity. University of Missouri system faculty members are national leaders in this very important problem. And Professor Winograd, who is here today, is working with WashU and all 4 universities of the UM system to submit a $30 million NIDA SAMHSA grant. And that'll be due on December 2nd, and we'll have some, hopefully, positive news to share with you in the spring of 2019. Recently, the School of Education at Mizzou announced $22 million in grants, primarily from the Department of Education, as well as the Kansas City Audio and Visual Company. This is a very innovative approach to address teacher training in rural Missouri with an emphasis on STEM education. They'll be working with many schools, 58 needy middle schools throughout the state, as well as 7 districts with very high poverty rates by providing them with not only access to the technologies, but also professional development for the teachers so that they can become more effective teachers to their students. During the last board meeting, the board members, led by Curator John Phillips, challenged us to come up with an effective strategy to support the Precision Medicine Initiative and the TPMC initiative. So what you see here is a new structure for this organization. It'll be led by Chancellor Cartwright and me. It'll have very strong partnership with the 3 other chancellors because this is a system-wide collaboration. But as you can see, there's a research component that's being led by Mark McIntosh, Elizabeth Laboa, working on the 3 very important working groups. But in addition, construction management, government relations, communications and marketing, financing, philanthropy, and economic development. This is a massive project. This is the most important research, building, economic development project that this university system has led. In order to make this successful, we have to hire a very, very compelling individual to serve as the project manager. So next week, we're going to be launching a national search for this project manager to work closely with all of the groups here and report to Alex Cartwright, the chancellor, and me. And we hope to have progress reports for all of you, but this is a very exciting opportunity, and I'm glad that we're at this stage to launch that search. On planning, operations, and stewardship, as part of our ongoing communications with senior leaders at the university, we recognize that for us to achieve the 5 Missouri compacts, it's very important for us to have outstanding department chairs to lead the faculty, students, and staff through those changes. And we have outstanding department chairs. But the quality, though, is uneven in some of the universities. We want to ensure that the selection of department chairs follow a very rigorous process, selecting individuals who will not only serve as the academic and research leaders, but also outstanding administrative leaders. So I've been in discussions with chancellors and provosts to change the process of selecting department chairs. And I'll go through that very quickly with all of you. First of all, we all know that department chairs not only lead, but they supervise faculty. They have to develop the strategic plans for the department and make very strategic decisions using the limited resources that we have to achieve excellence in those 5 Missouri compacts. They also should assign appropriate workloads for faculty members and staff so that we can achieve excellence in those 5 areas. We need to ensure that department chairs going forward are selected through a rigorous process, are provided the necessary support to achieve excellence, but also held accountable to achieve excellence. We are entrusting them with leading the units that are most responsible for creating the student success and research excellence that we need at this university. It's also very important to recognize that at major public universities or major research universities, the dean is the appointing authority. The dean selects committees that are inclusive of faculty, students, and staff. Faculty members are going to have a very critical role in the selection of the department chair. The searches could be national in scope. Internal candidates will also be considered. And the searchers are expected to produce truly diverse group of outstanding academic leaders who understand academic excellence, research excellence, but also have the administrative experience to lead and supervise faculty. Appointments should be for a period of 5 years, but they serve at will. That is a common approach that is used at major research universities. So we are going to ask all of the chancellors and provosts to work with their faculty to develop this policy, and we plan to bring to the board revisions to the CRRs to reflect the changes that I've discussed with you during the past two slides, using the past two slides. There's another very important project that Rick Baniak and Gary Allen will talk about, and this is Project Unify. Project Unify, at the simplest, using the simplest terms, is to unify the enterprise-wide software that we have at all 4 universities. It is unacceptable that we have PeopleSoft, Canvas, Starfish, and Slate implemented at 4 universities in 4 different manners. They can't communicate to each other. And so this prevents opportunities for our students and faculty members to collaborate on courses, research, and so forth. So this project that we call Project Unify for Student Success is not going to be easy to implement. If it were, it would have been done already. But I have confidence in our leaders to accomplish this, and I've given them a very aggressive timeline to complete this within 11 months. We expect bi-weekly updates of the progress, and we need to ensure that those who are responsible for implementation actually step up and do the important work. And I look forward to all of your support in making this happen. Last but not least, as part of the work with the task force that was led by Curator Chapman, we discussed the roles and responsibilities of senior leaders operating under the model of a one university system. And as part of that, with extensive discussions with senior leaders at the university, we decided to issue 3 executive orders that will be coming out in the coming weeks. As part of this, with finance and HR, there will be a strong correlation and partnership with the system CFO and system CHRO with the campus counterparts, working closely and in concert with the chancellors. With regards to IT, given the issues that I described for the need for Project Unify, we decided that for CIOs at the campuses, they will have a dual report to the system CIO and to their campus representative, be it the chancellor or the provost, so that we can ensure that we have allocation of resources as well as human resources to accomplish the goals that we need to unify our enterprise-wide software and to provide more efficient and higher quality services when it comes to IT. So Chairman Steelman, that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions? Well, I'm not going to let that pass then. President, the department chair changed, because I've called around, and I can't find any great research institution in this country that doesn't have the kind of accountability that you're talking about between the dean and the department heads and the university leadership. And this will require a change in some of our collected rules. Do you have a time frame on this?
Yes, I plan to bring the requested change to the CRR by the February meeting. In fact, the current CRR indicates that the appointing authority rests with the chancellors, and the chancellors can designate that down to the provost, to the dean, so that's not an issue. At Missouri S&T, there is a bylaw, faculty bylaw, that indicates that the process is slightly different, but I understand that they are revising their faculty bylaws now, so this is an opportune time to make this change. But this is such a critical change that we need. Without this change, we will not be able to accomplish the objectives that we've set out as part of our strategic plans. And department chairs are critical. As I stated, we have some outstanding department chairs, but it's been uneven.
No questions? President Choi, thank you very much. Chancellor George, we're looking forward to your telling us about some of your highlights at University of Missouri St. Louis.
Thank you very much, Curator Steelman, and welcome to the University of Missouri St. Louis. I apologize for the weather yesterday, and it said the buck stops here, and so I guess my fault. But anyway, it's a great day here today, and I do want to compliment my team as Curator Steelman did in terms of how well they responded to that, and that includes everyone, including the security officers that are outside in the hall. I've been asked to just do some updates on what's going on at the University here in Missouri St. Louis. A lot of exciting things happening here. This past year, we enrolled nearly 21,000 different individual students doing our spring, our fall, and our summer terms. We come from almost every state of the union, and mostly Missouri, but we come from every state of the union, and we represent about 65 to 70 countries here in our student body. We have a tagline here that says that we educate St. Louis, and I think that's true. And you can look at all the major corporations throughout the region and say who's the biggest feeder for all of these, and it's the University of Missouri St. Louis. So we educate St. Louis, and we also provide the workforce for St. Louis. And as I think my last time I made the presentation here, I said without the University of Missouri St. Louis wouldn't exist. I mean, we are very critical to this region and to the city itself. Our enrollment, we saw some of these figures already in the presentation made by the president. We're having a slight increase in new students, which is good because most universities in our state are going down with new students, but we're going up with new students. We have a challenge with transfers that we're trying to correct and realign. But things are going well with respect to enrollment, and things are going in the right direction. In terms of athletes, we call them student athletes. We're Division II athletics, and we have 120 of our students are what we call academic all-conference honors. That's the Great Lakes Valley Conference. By the way, it's probably the toughest Division II conference in the nation, and also my colleague from S&T is part of that conference. But we also last year had a winning record overall, so if you take all the wins and losses, and that's reversed from about 10 years ago when we had losing records, but now we have winning records. This past year, we issued 3,100 degrees. The number of degrees that you issue is an output measure. And input is enrollment. Enrollment's critical. You're not going to get the degrees out without enrollment. But really what counts in our minds is how many degrees are we going to issue. And we crossed that 3,000 threshold about 4 or 5 years ago. And we want to hold that threshold and maybe even increase it further. But the idea is to get students getting degrees. And I think you heard it mentioned yesterday, I think Bob Samples mentioned that our 100,000th graduate crossed the stage this May. And that really is an amazing feat when you think that we were, back in 1963, all we were a golf course. We were the Belle Reef Country Club. We developed from scratch into a university, and now we have 100,000 alums, 114,000 degrees. It's really amazing that how we've come along to that. Our average starting salary of our graduates, it's about $43,000. It's actually above the system average, interestingly, and we have a picture of one of our chemistry majors there. We heard from a chemistry graduate student just at our breakfast time. we do fairly well, not fairly well, very well in certain programmatic rankings by national media and, for example, U.S. News and World Report. Our international business program consistently is ranked in the top 20. It has been as high as 8th, but it's always ranked in the top 20. And that's not by happenstance. We actually put resources into that, and that's one of our programs that we feed. I don't have a slide on this, but criminology and criminal justice, for example, in the graduate program is ranked in the top 5 in the nation by U.S. News and World Report. You just saw from the President's report, our research expenditures are going in the right direction. Awards are up, expenditures are up, and we hopefully, this slide here shows expenditures. Actually, our awards are up even more, so I'm hoping next year we'll see even higher increases in expenditures. Oh, and let me go back to this. There's a picture here of Beth Hubner. Beth Hubner has been awarded a second phase of a major grant from the MacArthur Foundation. The second phase is $2.5 million. And what's particularly interesting about this project, it's a partnership. It's a partnership with the county. And, we look around this region to see how we can partner, as well as, of course, across the campuses. An example of partnering across the campuses is the Ameren Accelerator and UMSL Accelerate have partnered to create a venue at Cortex for new businesses, and all 4 campuses are participating in this. And Ameren is investing $1 million a year to UMSL to keep this program going. And I'd say by all measures, it's a very, very successful program. We're very much into veterans here on the campus, and we have 430 military-connected students, and we have a Veterans Center which is doing extremely well, and we get awards for that. Military Times has named us to its Best for Vets list for the 5th consecutive year. And where our fundraising keeps going up, holding steady right now, and moving up toward the $30 million a year. This includes $3 million for annual and endowed scholarships, and we're doing a special thrust now, as the other campuses are, is to try to increase our annual scholarships and actually increase the percentage of our giving that goes into scholarships. And certainly we're going to be working on that with our new Vice Chancellor for Advancement. I'll show his picture again. We saw it earlier with President Choi. He's without a beard in this. I see he's got a beard over here. So I don't know what his look's going to be when he gets here. But and maybe at Texas Tech they have to have no beards. Tip my hat to Rick Boniek and our team in finances that for the 2nd consecutive year we've realized a budget surplus. 4 or 5 years ago, we were struggling with matching revenues with expenditures. We are now solving that problem, and particularly looking at a 5-year projection. And we have stability now in our finances. We just finished some major renovations in Benton Hall, and this was contributions from the state, contributions from the system, and we put some ourselves in. This is on the heels of $150 million of capital construction over the past 3 or 4 years on the campus, the biggest kind of constructions we've had for quite some time. And this particular last activity is going inside the walls, the HVAC, and the unglamorous stuff, but stuff that's critical to making us function well as a university. You approved our strategic plan last meeting. We're grateful for that. We Transform Lives is a tagline on our mission. You can see a picture of it there on the side of the music building. It's on the side of the J.C. Penney building here as well. It's on the side of the science building. When the review team was here for the Higher Learning Commission, everyone on campus could at least could give them the 3 words, "We Transform Lives." I'm not sure everyone can memorize the full mission statement, but those 3 words. But you can't say these things in public till the report is in, but by every sense of the visit by the team that came on, I think our review came out very well with the Higher Learning Commission. We'll know in about 6 weeks with the first draft of the report. I've got a quick video.
At the University of Missouri St. Louis, we believe that when we are united behind one purpose, we are a powerful force with unlimited impact. We believe each and every member of our campus community has the ability to empower our students, colleagues, and the entire St. Louis region. Recently, we've turned these beliefs into a new mission, one that's simple but powerful. We transform lives. How? together. By understanding that everything we do stems from 6 core values that make us who we are. Trust. At UMSL, trust is sacred. It is the heart of our mission, the basis of our integrity, the foundation that makes the rest of our values and goals a possibility. We actively establish and earn it at every moment. Inclusion. Because celebrating and appreciating diversity isn't enough. We strive to create a truly inclusive community, one where equity is reality. Innovation. We believe innovation is about more than new ideas. It's about the desire to see a problem solved or a person helped. We believe we are all innovators, driving change for the purpose of the greater good. Access. Because a learning environment free from barriers for any one person makes that environment better for all people. We believe our classrooms, research, creativity, and service to the community are for everyone, no exceptions. Success. We are committed to meeting our students wherever they are and empowering them to achieve what success means for them. It's the reason we're all here, and something we strive for at every moment. Engagement. Because it is our responsibility to reach out with open minds, invite others into conversation, and create solutions. We use our energy and resources to forge partnerships across campus and within the community that are built in the spirit of collaboration. Our vision is a future where, together, we continue to make UMSL a beacon of hope, a force for good, and a leader in the pursuit of excellence in education, impactful research, and community service. Our vision is a future brighter than anything our founders could have possibly imagined, one where we transform lives, starting with our own.
And those were our values. They laminate perfectly on top of the compacts that we have for the strategic plan. That's the first piece of our presentation. We have another piece, and I want to bring up to here Rob Paul, who's the director of our Missouri Institute for Mental Health, Rachel Winograd, who you saw her pictured earlier in the president's presentation, who's director of our Missouri Opioid State Targeted Response, and they're going to talk to you about what goes on at the Missouri Institute for Mental Health. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob and Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present some of our work. This is an exciting time. I'm going to do my very best not to over talk, so we've ensured to get Rachel up here as well. I'm very excited about work that my group has been doing here at the University of Missouri St. Louis on a project that actually started back in about 2002. And this was a work that's NIH funded and a goal to understand and be able to predict and provide tools for clinicians on how to identify Alzheimer's disease, and then back into the key mechanisms of how this disease is actually starting to take over the brain and progress. That's going to be a tough one to see, but the main picture here is that we can characterize Alzheimer's disease very well, but we have a very poor ability to predict the time sequence of how symptoms are going to develop, over which time, and at what point patients will become risky in terms of driving, in terms of medication management, in terms of decision making, and really what are the mechanisms of the disease that drive that progress. Part of the reason why our field has not been able to solve this problem is that the field has kind of been stuck on very specific parts of the brain and kind of conceptualized those parts as whole individual parts that are not unique in terms of their own anatomy. But we know that that's not true. It's just been our tools to get at the details have not been very good. We started working in this space, working with computer and math science back in the early 2000s, and this was to develop new ways to see the anatomy in its true form, what's most like when we're looking at actual post-mortem tissue and pathology. And what we can see with this high-level imaging is that we can parse out the separate pieces of these regions of the brain. Rather than just look at the hippocampus, we can look at the head size of the body and also of the different subgroups, the subregions, multiple subregions of the hippocampus, and then look at the tracts that connect out of those regions that progress to the rest of the brain. That's never been done before, and required some very high-level neuroimaging work to do that. We developed that here eventually here, and actually an undergraduate student, Lori Baker, who was working in my lab at the University of Missouri, published those results as the first author in neurology in 2014, which still is the flagship journal in the field. And this is a heat map that's even more difficult to see, but if you just see the side over here that has the darkest color gray and red, this is the area of the brain. These are the regions listed along the side that have come out of artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning as the key regions of the brain that are changing in the earliest stages of the disease out of these very specific subregions of the hippocampus. Never ever been published before, completely brand new, and very accurate in predicting the time sequence of symptoms that also tells us what's happening in terms of the neuropathology, what's going on in the brain biologically that's driving those changes. So we're really excited about this work. We're taking it into the wearable space so that we can start to capture data automatically through people's smartphones, through their daily living, and again, identify what these risk stratification models are so that clinicians can have a much better model to predict what's going to happen in terms of time sequence, and researchers can then back into what are the key biology systems that are changing and driving this to guide therapeutics. So this is an exciting area for us. I know I had to go fairly quickly. Happy to answer any questions, and thank you again for the opportunity to share.
There's a question.
Oh, sure.
So this is an example of the contributions that various campuses might have to the precision medicine that we're having. Have you been approached, or are you approachable in terms of what you might contribute to the research that will be physically occurring on the Columbia campus, but would really benefit from centers of excellence like what you're developing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. I would say sometimes I'm described as not approachable, but I am absolutely engaged in the TPMC initiative. I'm part of the Neuro Working Group. Have been actively involved in that through our weekly calls and providing information to the system. I'm actually extremely excited about the initiative and the opportunity to bridge the intellectual capacity across the 4 campuses. We do a lot of work on the international space, so the distance between campuses is no longer an issue because of the technology that we have to be engaged. And this is an initiative that's unlike any others in terms of being able to integrate the source resources that exist across the campuses. So I'm extremely excited about that.
Great answer. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Rachel Winograd, also at Missouri Institute of Mental Health here at UMSL, and I'm going to talk to you guys for just a few minutes about our current opioid crisis and what we're doing about it. To ground us all in the relevance, you can see this heat map here of where people are dying from heroin overdoses in the state of Missouri. Clearly, the hotspot is right here in the St. Louis region. Year to year, we typically account for nearly 70% of opioid-related deaths in the state. What are people dying from? It's not prescription pills anymore. What people are dying from is synthetic opioids, specifically fentanyl, and that's illicitly made fentanyl that's made underground, not necessarily the fentanyl that we get in hospitals for end-of-life or palliative care. Here's a picture of comparable lethal doses of heroin, fentanyl, and carfentanil, which thankfully hasn't really hit Missouri too strongly yet. Fentanyl is a white powder. It's easily mixed in with the white powder heroin that we have here in the Midwest. This has really increased the rate of death that we're seeing in the Midwest, which you're not seeing so much on the West Coast or other parts of the country where the drug market is still dominated by black tar heroin. Because of the high potency of fentanyl and the rate at which it's killing people, as President Choi alluded to earlier, I don't prefer the term opioid crisis because people think of an orange prescription pill bottle, and honestly, we're way past that. It's more aptly an overdose crisis or even a poisoning crisis. Our language affects our responses. If we call this what it is, which is a poisoning crisis, we'll deploy more public health emergency responses, and that's what we need at this time. So what we've tried to do in partnership with the Missouri Department of Mental Health, our large addiction science team at MIMH, and community and academic partners throughout the state is an attempt to transform the system of how we approach opiate use disorder and addiction broadly. This involves efforts in prevention, treatment, recovery support, harm reduction, focusing on racial disparities and racial equity, social determinants of health, poverty, trauma, everything that goes hand in hand with addiction, and we know that there is no silver bullet. We're prioritizing fast access to medications that work to treat opiate use disorder and medications, specifically naloxone, that reverse overdoses in times of emergency. So initial results are promising. What you see here in this table are numbers and percents of change from 2015, 2016, and 2017. Our efforts really ramped up in 2017, and you see here, to help guide your eyes, the impact that making a change in St. Louis City and County has on the state overall. So you see from 2015 to 2016, numbers of death increased significantly locally here, and that mapped on at a statewide level. When we made an impact here in city and county, even though our efforts are statewide, we really concentrated them here in the eastern region because this is the area of highest need. It affected our numbers as a state. Similarly, this affects our position as a state nationally. So from 2015 to 2016, we went from being well above the national average in terms of our increase in overdose deaths, well above average, not in a good way. And then from 2016 to 2017, we were well below average. So much of this is driven by what's actually happening in St. Louis City specifically. Often this is a region that is ignored, and yet it gets the brunt of any type of health crisis that comes through our region. You see there was a 110% increase from 2015 to 2016, and yet last year, even when the influx of fentanyl has been at its height, and this is really an uphill climb in every way, shape, and form, we still saw a 10% decrease in deaths in St. Louis City when numbers nationally were still skyrocketing. So this map from the New York Times depicts this visually. We see that our rate of growth in Missouri is less than what would be expected based on our Midwest position, except for Oklahoma. They have some interesting context variables going on there. But clearly, we want to see these numbers going down. Holding steady is not acceptable. We're losing more than 3 people a day in Missouri alone, and that's from fatal overdose, not to even comment on how people are suffering non-fatal overdoses and brain damage and are not getting the help that they need, and families are destroyed, and people are living on the streets, and they need help. Clearly, this is a monumental problem. We're doing our best to tackle it from every angle at MIMH and with our partners throughout the state. Going forward, as President Choi mentioned, we're really excited to be partnering with Washington University, state departments, and community partners all over the eastern region to apply for an almost $90 million 4-year award jointly released by NIDA and SAMHSA. We're working fast and furiously on that and hope to get that in within the next few weeks. Thank you so much for your time.
Comment, how wonderful, and for you to be front and center from, I mean, we're not affiliated directly with the hospital, but for you to connect with them is just terrific.
Thank you.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. And
Thank
also,
you very much.
Also, Dr. Winograd, when this opportunity was made available through NIDA and SAMHSA, reached out to Mark McIntosh and said she wants to make this a system priority, and so we have all 4 universities participating. So thank you, and Professor Paul, thank you. We have world-class faculty at our university, and this is just 2 of our examples.
Is Chancellor George escaping from taking
No,
questions?
he's there, yeah.
Because I saved my questions. I didn't ask any of you.
Well, we are proud of you for saving your questions, John, but the chancellor should not escape.
Give me a zinger.
So part of, you've had a admission increase, which is good. So I've got questions about this is our first year, I think, when we made in-state available to all of Illinois. Before that, maybe 2 years ago, we had it available to the
22 counties.
adjoining
Yeah,
counties.
Right, yeah.
And I think what we said back then was that, let's see how that works and the financial cost benefit. And do we need to do actual in-state full tuition, or is 80%, reduction enough to attract them? And so my question is twofold. One, it's great, it's threefold. It's great that that has had a beneficial impact. Secondly, have we thought through whether we need to do full state, in-state tuition in order to have that attraction? Is there an analysis on that? And then thirdly, are we doing that with other contiguous states within the system, or are we doing portions like Arkansas? I think we talked about doing 80%, and I don't know where we are on that. And then finally, is the adjoining state rule for Illinois true for matriculation within the system on the other campuses, or is it for the St. Louis campus only? In other words, if somebody wants to do nuclear engineering, can they now go to Rolla because they're from Illinois? That's probably your question. So I've got three questions there, all of them good because we know it's been successful.
Yeah, they're interrelated too. And with respect to the last one, my understanding is it's just for our campus. I mean, we brought it to the board. We had a proposal. We had the 22 counties, and we said we wanted to extend it to all of the counties. So I would say this is not something, unless someone wants to correct me, that Raleigh can automatically do this as well.
You are right.
Now, having said that, I mean, they're watching us carefully to see how this works. Did it work? Yes. A reason why our freshmen are up is because of the partnership with Illinois. You asked a tricky question. I think, if I understand your question, is what if we didn't have this, or could we now back off and not have this tuition and still get the enrollment? Was that sort of your question?
Well, actually, that's the good trick. I'm not sure we can back off with Illinois.
I don't. So all I can say is we went up with it. It would be a success. We wanted to deliver 100 students. We got close to that. So by every measure and the proposal we took to the board is a success. Now, your other question, maybe it was the second one, relates to other states. We indeed are looking into that because a lot of our competitors, Edwardsville and others, are doing it to more than one state. And so that's something that we'll probably be coming back to this board again in the future for something maybe not in state, but maybe something in between. There's the MSEP, which is a collection of states, about 12 or 13, that have something that's in between. We already do have that. And so my guess is we're going to come back to you for something that's going to be an in-state for more than one state.
And this might be a system question, because as a system, we should be looking at contiguous states. And I also think we might look at it as can they go to each campus, because we've been saying that each campus is unique, and you may want to go to S&T for specific reasons and could be attracted, even though it's a little farther to get there than it is to get to St. Louis. So it's all good. I'm just saying, have we maximized, and can we expand it? And maybe not always do full in-state. Arkansas, do they give full state? They don't. I thought they did 80%. You could go to Arkansas and you only get a 20%.
Right. It's my understanding now they've become very aggressive, and they do provide in-state, especially those that are in southwest Missouri.
In addition to in-state, though, they also are very aggressive in providing scholarships. So it's not just their tuition. They are very aggressive in southwest Missouri.
Well, to conclude that, it's successful, and hopefully it can be extrapolated appropriately.
If I can make a comment on this, that the Curators Stillman, you mentioned scholarships. I'm told by our people in enrollment management and admissions that often in marketing something, it depends upon whether you're calling it a tuition which is reduced or scholarship. So sometimes it's easier for us to get in the door, capture the attention of students if we have a lower tuition, as opposed to then saying there's a scholarship. So it's a delicate balance as to how you're going to give them that low price.
Brian?
Yeah, I'd just add, we did actually do this for UMKC with the Kansas rate and the Heartland rate, which wasn't full in-state. I think sometimes it is better to scholarship. And the other thing is, those rates, if you recall when the board approved those, they actually have to come back to the board every 5 years for approval, so we didn't approve it in perpetuity. And part of that was to evaluate the success of those programs. I know for MU and Missouri S&T, we have to kind of look at the mix of current students, and they've got a larger out-of-state draw. So some of the strategies that make sense at UMKC and UMSL don't make sense for MU or S&T.
I have one other question, not quite as broad, and that is, intrigued by your veterans program here. MU has a particularly robust veterans program. Of course, they have ROTC, and I've recently learned more about how effective it is and how they connect with actually a good VA hospital, and how veterans often don't want to come into the system for reasons that you get tagged or there's a taint sometimes. Have you, or could you, if you haven't already, visit with the folks at MU and reciprocate in how you deal with that, because it's pretty important to the veterans and pretty important for us to keep them in and make them successful.
I'd say that's an excellent idea. I don't know to what extent our people at our center have been interfacing. The person that actually runs our center now is a retired lieutenant colonel who actually ran the ROTC program that we have jointly with WashU. So we do have connections with WashU, but certainly that's something to look into.
Our director is the MU campus director is a 20-year retired Marine, African American, and I was hugely impressed by him. So
I'll raise the issue. Yeah. Our person, his name is Jim Craig, and he actually is also a department chair of a broader department, which includes military studies. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chancellor George, and everybody else. That was an excellent report. Now for the critical issue discussions, which Dr. Choi has a number of people going to address the board. The subject is transformation, and I know everybody has probably heard that enough, but you're going to hear it more. I think that it absolutely has to be said that this board and this president and the leadership are absolutely committed. I understand higher ed. I understand you've heard this word before and then it faded away. This is going to happen, and the people who are talking today, when you hear them, you'll understand that this is real, and we are transforming this university.
Thank you. Our first speaker is going to be Dr. Elizabeth Laboa, and she'll speak to transformation broadly, but also transformations that she was able to oversee in the College of Engineering at Mizzou. But when we talk about transformation and considering the difference with change, transformation is irreversible. So that 5 years from now, perhaps with a different board and perhaps different leadership, the changes that we make today would not be reversed, that we're on the right path to continue to make the transformations to grow excellence at this university. So, Dr. Laboa?
Thank you, President, and thank you, Curators, for the time. The President asked those of us speaking to give a very candid, honest dialogue about our thoughts and what we have done. I've been here 3 years now, as of October 15th. And I'm starting with this slide about transformation needed at UMY and the whole system. And I've got a lot of bullet points. We won't have time to go through all these. What I do want to say in the context of these bullet points is that we have started the path. And I'll show in a later slide that what we've done in the College of Engineering. But we have a lot of work to do. And I have no doubt that we will get there, but change is hard. Now, let's talk about from a 30,000-foot view, just a few of these things. The changes occurring in higher education. There is a perception across the country of whether higher education really is worth the value. Now, I could debate this for hours and come out very strongly, I believe, in the value that we provide. You've heard some incredible scientists here from UMSL. We all have these incredible scientists working. We have incredible students that we're educating. But there is a perception that is negative about higher education. The expectations of Gen Z or iGen, however you want to refer to this generation, are distinctly different than when we went to school. And they are operating at a pace and an expectation and in an industry, an environment of Industry 4.0 of how technology is changing, that they expect a different model and pedagogy, and we have got to step it up and pick it up and make sure that we are offering the best experiential education. We have financial reality. I'm so thankful, I know all of us are so thankful to the state for restoring our cuts and bringing back our budget. This is a reality across the entire nation for higher education, and we've got to do more with less. I have no doubt that our legislators will continue to work with us, and we will continue to help explain what the work is that we do, but it's a distinct challenge we all face. The other issues, when I came here 3 years ago and walked in the door in my College of Engineering, I sat down with every single faculty in the college, one-on-one. And I did a very open discussion. I shared my offer letter. I told them that we had a $9 million debt, greater than a $9 million debt in the college, which we are very close to paying off faster than expected, and worked with complete transparency. That drives trust. We all need to do that. The faculty need to do that with us. Staff need to do it with faculty. We all need to work in that modality. Because of status quo, with a lot of issues, that the financial reality had been hard, that maybe changes had happened in the past and they had not been successful, we could fall into a culture of complacency, and that cannot happen. Culture of complacency versus excellence, and excellence is what's required, and that's what's going to really unify us and get us to achieve our full goals. Data-driven decisions and best practice approaches. We are doing this in a lot of areas, but in some modalities we still do things because historically that's the way it's always been done. It's got to change if we are going to work with the utmost of efficiency and efficacy. Competition versus collaboration. I have another little anecdote I'll share. When I first started as the Dean of Engineering, I went to a leadership dinner. This was actually even before President Choi and Chancellor Cartwright were here yet. And I probably had been on campus 4 or 5 weeks, and someone from another campus walked up to me and said, "Oh, you're the new dean. My engineering school's better than your engineering school." And I remember thinking, you know, and I'd only lived and worked on the coast of the country, not of our in East and West Coast. And I remember I turned to this individual and I said, the challenge is if we don't get over these differences, any level of competition, we do not exist. So we have to come together. And I will tell you, in the 3 years I've been here, it's been incredible, the changes I'm seeing. But we still have more work to do because we need to get our full realization of our full strength and the excellence that we have to bring. And that excellence is part of our role in the state, in the nation, and in the world. The president called a really, what I thought was an exceptional change leadership workshop that he had Drew Erdman of the governor's office come and lead for all the system leaders. Drew Erdman showed this slide. 70% of change programs fail. Why do these transformation efforts fail? Well, the boxes are there on the right. I'll tell you right now, yes, we have challenges with resources and budget. We will continue to work through those openly, transparently, complete open books, and work as a team. Make sure we don't overlap what we're doing, don't duplicate things. I will tell you, I feel incredibly solid. Our management behavior not supporting change, that is not a problem here, and I'm thrilled to be in that environment. We do have employee resistance to change in some cases. It's hard. Change is hard. It's scary for our faculty and staff if they think that, well, what does this mean? Am I going to lose my job? What does it mean in this reality? And so we need to be aware of that. We need to bring as many along as we can, a culture of excellence, but realize we still have to push through and drive the change even if not everybody is on board. As long as we're making decisions using data-driven metrics, best practice approaches, an open and collaborative environment. Here are the changes that we've done within the College of Engineering. And I want to be really respectful of your time. So again, I won't go into huge details, but we did complete openness and transparency and very regular communication. I have a budget committee that has students on it, faculty, staff. We have an open books approach. Any faculty, any staff, any student can walk in at any time and see anything they want to see on the budget. And we also post that on our website. I had a challenge. When I did that one-on-one with every faculty in the college, found out about some personnel challenges. We have to deal with those, and they're hard, but we do it. We have a workload policy that's fair, open, and transparent that includes all metrics related to research and teaching excellence. We merge departments to optimize and not duplicate. We centralized all of our administrative functions, and which is now much more efficient and efficacious, but again, it was tough. And now we work much better, and our staff are actually very happy, but it was tough going through these major changes. Our budget is driven by our strategy. We incentivize. We do not use any historical allocation approach. We use a strategy-driven budget. And we implemented and really talk constantly about our core values. At MU, we have respect, responsibility, discovery, and excellence. We take those, we go even further in the College of Engineering. We talk constantly about integrity, accountability, collaboration, and excellence. And we talk about that constantly and establish it as our culture. So I know we probably don't have time to show this. It's 2 minutes, you sure?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, this last video was something that was shown also at this leadership workshop. I found it personally really inspiring, so I hope you enjoy it, and I thank again Drew Erdman from the Governor's Office for leading that. You want to start it? Thank you.
नहीं होगा यार।
सर आपके लिए उस पार कार का इंतजाम किया है सर। सर आइए सर प्लीज। ए चल चल इधर जाओ बोलना क्या बात करता है क्या ऊपर से जाएगा क्या ऊपर से जा जा
गया मेन शो।
I hate this country. कुछ करो ना।
अब मैं वहां जाके क्या उखाड़ लूंगा।
कैसी जाने बूंदे आई जाने कैसा दर्द लाई सामने क्या है ये तेरे क्यों रुका है तू बता रे हो तुझको पार लेगा कौन होगा वो मसीहा वो जिसे तू ढूंढता है वो ही है तू वही है तुझ में तेरा रास्ता है तुझ में तेरा है सहारा तू ही तुझको पार लेगा तू ही है तेरा किनारा तुझ में तेरा रास्ता है तुझ में तेरा है सहारा तू ही तुझको पार लेगा तू ही है तेरा किनारा जिसे ढूंढता है तू ही रहे तेरा मसीहा हो
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions for Dean LeVoir? Any comments? Thank you very much.
Was it easy?
No, change is not easy. should always do the right thing.
Was it worth it?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Good answers. All right, Marshall Stewart, he's our Vice Chancellor for Extension and Engagement, as well as the Chief Engagement Officer for the university. And he has also made some incredible transformations in Extension. So Marshall.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. It's good to be with you, and I'm going to start out by giving you a couple of thoughts to think about as we frame this conversation, build on what Dean LaBoa said. First thing is leadership's hard. It's easy to teach, easy to read about, it's hard to do. Second thing I'll tell you is that when you deal with leadership, you really need to think about the fact that you're dealing with people, and that in all of our lives, that when you ask people if they like change or they don't like change, most people say they like change, but they fear what they're going to have to give up in change. So it's really a fear of loss that really causes people to back away from change. It's not the word change so much as it is that fear of loss. So leaders are then challenged, well, how do you deal with that? How do you walk people through that? And so in our work of thinking about a whole statewide network and about the University of Missouri, not only Columbia, but now the whole system, we think about that in those frames. So how do we bring people with us? And how do we figure out a way to move that needle so we get there not only their minds, but their hearts as well as we move forward and change? So we're going to walk you through some things like that. This slide here really talks about why we transform, and the best way I can think about it and why we go through transformational change is really, I think back to when I was a kid growing up in Eastern North Carolina. About this time of year, I'd be sitting on the couch and I'd be looking at the Sears Wish Book. Now, I know most of you in this room don't know what that is probably anymore, but the Sears Wish Book was something that came to our home every fall, and I loved it because I could circle things, and I would tell my parents, that's what Santa Claus needs to bring me. In my basement today, you can go there and you can see the electric football game that I got. That's a metal board basically that vibrates, that moves a little player along. I've still got it. In 1973, I got that. Well, we look at Sears today and the transformations that they did not make as they moved from the catalog to the little storefront, went to the mall, and now we see that where we are today, Amazon has basically taken that away. That's where we are in higher education. I think there's some forces we have to think about that are affecting us in higher education. Those forces deal with, number one, I think higher education, not just in Missouri, but around the country, really forgot about who brought us to the dance, and it was the people. We're a public institution, and we have to be really in line with that. And because of that, we lost trust, we lost relationship, but more importantly, probably overall, we lost the narrative of what we do. So what we've been about is trying to restore that narrative. How do you restore that in this state and around the country as it relates to the University of Missouri? We also know that the world is a flat place. Tom Friedman told us that when he wrote a famous book, The World is Flat. And it's changed who we serve and also where and when and how we do that learning and that discovery that we do. So we really have to think about our clientele, our partners in that learning journey. And that flattening world has told us we've got to do things differently. Another piece of that is the expectations. You know, when I first came to the University of Missouri, one of the questions was, well, why do you need extension? Well, we did a study on that. To give you an example of that, we did a study to say we spend somewhere around $78 million a year in monies from federal, state, local resources together, grants, contracts, and fees, all that together, was about $78 million. And what we found with a third-party review was that we had a $945 million impact on the state of Missouri. And what that does, it tells a story about the ROI that you have as an institution. That was just our piece, not to include the rest of the university. So again, that ROI becomes very important because stewardship has to be a cornerstone of everything we do as it relates to the future of the institution. So how do you start doing this kind of work? Well, I think it's context. I think every leader has to look at it differently. When I look at it, I think about students as 6 million citizens in the state of Missouri. I think about all 6 million of them as being potential people that we can touch and interact with, not just those on our campuses, but how do we embrace that and take knowledge out to all those folks? So one of the things we believed in was going about this process by slowing down to speed up. So we spent a lot of time learning, and I think leaders have to do that. I think you have to get context, understand the place you're in, understand what's going on there. I didn't know near as much about Lewis and Clark when I came here as I do now. Lewis and Clark's pretty important in the state of Missouri, and there's a reason for that. I didn't understand that history and how this state was developed. You have to know that. Context matters. So slowing down to speed up is an important part of change leadership. I also think change management, when you think about that, you need to look at data. As Dean LaBoa said, we've done a lot of that. We've also had conversations. There's a qualitative piece of this, because if you take data and don't have in context of how people feel, you can't move them. You won't bring people with you. You'll divorce yourself, disconnect. So again, that becomes a part of it. And then having that third-party review, people outside to look at you and say, have you ever thought about this? And I know our leaders here around this table have oftentimes recently talked about Arizona State as being one of those places you've gone and looked to see what that other third party might be able to tell you. And that leads us to some questions that fundamentally I think all of us have to ask is, who are we? Who are we fundamentally? What is it that we are? And then secondly, what do we aspire to be, or who do we aspire to be? In the middle of those two questions is something called a strategic plan. Because if you know who you are and you know where you want to be, then you do a planning process that's in the middle to take you there. And that's where the 5 mission areas that have been surfaced in the strategic planning process of the university system have really come to clear for all of us. So starting well is important. Another piece of that is to really think about strengths and challenges. And I thought I'd share this because I think this is important. You know, what did I see when I came here? Well, the first thing I saw was a lot of strengths. We had great talent, wonderful impact. $945 million is approaching $1 billion. Well, I'm glad to say that. We had great grassroots. We've got people all over this state that truly love the University of Missouri, love our campuses. I've told the story to some of our chancellors. I can be all over the state. I can be in eastern Missouri and hear about stories of alums who went to UMKC and vice versa. I can hear that. I can be in different places of the state and hear about Missouri S&T. I can hear those things, and certainly the University of Missouri and Columbia. So again, that grassroots piece is really important. I also found we had a statewide network. We had people that really wanted to get with us and help us move forward. And then we have great heritage. This institution, when you look at the whole institution, 1839, when it was the first public institution west of the Mississippi, first land grant west of the Mississippi. There's a lot of firsts, and we need to build on that. You don't need to walk from that. You need to say, okay, that's who we are. That's our heritage. How do we build on that? So strengths are important. Then I saw challenges. I saw reduced budgets. I saw declining personnel. I saw low morale. When you see those first two, you understand why the third bullet's there. You saw an uncertain future. People didn't really know, where are we going? Is there going to be a future? And then there were strained relationships. How do we build relationships and make them more vibrant going forward? So those were challenges. So what did we do going out of that? Well, we spent a lot of time listening, learning to lead. I do think those are 3 fundamentals that every leader has to think about. You got to listen a lot. That doesn't mean talking. That means listening. It means learning, digesting, understanding what they say if you're going to lead effectively. So how do we do that process? Well, internally and externally. When I say internally, I'm talking about on the campus, externally with our stakeholders across the state. We really did 3 steps here. And the first step was to go out, learn, listen, lead, but then you come back, you review what you've got, you distill that information, and then you verify. Did I hear it right? Am I listening? Did I hear you right? And we do that by going out again and doing another round. And this is tiring, exhausting work, but leaders have to do this, I think, to again review, distill, and then adjust where you need to make adjustments, because sometimes you don't hear things the way they intended them. So you've got to hear that again. And then the third realm of leadership change to me is really reviewing, distilling, and adjusting again. And we will continue to make some adjustments because the terrain changes. And that's part of being a nimble, flexible organization going forward. But you do at some point have to release. And then you iterate, you can adjust, and again, that's with internal and external audiences as well. So, Dr. Choi asked us to share some specifics of what we've done. There's a whole litany of these things, and probably enough, Dr. Choi, to spend hours talking about these things. But one of the big things that we did just 3 weeks ago, we released our new direction for extension and engagement as it relates to the MU campus specifically, with clear metrics and results. We are not going after goals, we're going after results. And we're framing it that way because we think results implies that we're definitely going after some hard kinds of things we want to move in terms of the state of Missouri, using the university as a platform for that. We looked at a new staffing structure, and that will be implemented January 2019. We are moving fast, doing some retooling, moving people around, and also doing some hiring as we go through that process. Making strategic investments in high touch, which is sort of the new way to engage, and also, or the classic way to engage, and then high tech, sort of the new engagement model. How do you touch people in different ways using technology? Standardization of e-learning, e-commerce, and those platforms. We've got new platforms now we're standing up to do some new engagement with our citizenry. Addition of strategic programs and partnerships. While we did reduce some things, we also added some things because some things made sense for us to begin to work with strategically. Some other critical decisions were elimination of programs and services. We did have to eliminate some stuff, and that's not easy. And there's nothing fancy about it, but sometimes you just, again, going back to Dean LaBoa, you look at the data, you look at the analysis, you look at the impact, and you say to yourself, can we really build strength there? Maybe that's an area we don't need to be in that somebody else can do better, and that's okay. It's okay not to do everything. Reduction of administration and communication structures. We retooled a lot of that and took a lot of hits in that to make ourselves leaner and better as it relates to the shop I work in every day. Outsourcing of operations to improve efficiency and effectiveness. There are things that we used to do. We used to have a warehouse operation at MU. Today we outsource that. And that has just happened in the last few months that we've really moved in that model. That's a big change for us about how our materials go out, et cetera. We also have consolidated, brought together people that were across our units in extension, in particular financially and in human resource, and we brought them now together so that they're centralized in our office. We've also standardized our fee structures. We have varying fee structures, and we're doing that right now and actually doing a rollout of that across all the counties now as to how we charge various fees. And then also resetting our advocacy efforts to really mirror image what Dusty and others are trying to do in government relations so that we're aligned so that it's one message, one institution, one university moving forward. This gives you an overview of the things we've been working on. I'll go back and say something I said earlier is that this is hard. It's not easy. And leadership itself is, leadership change is, but it's something that's an imperative that we must do. And I really hope that as we go forward that we can continue to learn from each other. I know when I hear others talk about this, I do want to again say in closing that the work that Drew Erdman did with us a few weeks ago, I thought was excellent. And I really appreciate his work and his input to help us be better as an institution. So I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
I've just got a couple of questions, both for you and Dean LaBoa. Would you say that the process following these changes, though they were very hard, is better or worse than the way that you operated before?
I'll speak for my area. I think it's much better. I think of course, I guess looking at it from my perspective, you would expect that. But the thing I always listen to, we just did an extension summit. We do one every year, and people from all over the state come in, they get their training and development. And one of the things I always listen for is that hall talk as people are leaving. And you can almost feel relief. They've got clarity, and they know what they got to go do now. And they're going out and doing that. And they're feeling energized by that. We've actually, in some of this change, one of the things that might be helpful for Julia to say is that we've pulled off some of the restraint and given them more freedom. But with freedom comes responsibility. So it's not freedom to just free will. There's clarity about the target, but how they get there, we've given them some flexibility with. So it's very energizing to people when you can change in that way. And to really quote David Novak, who is the Novak Institute there at MU, it's about bringing people with you. To me, if you can do that, if you can pivot, there will be people who choose not to come, and that's their choice. But overall, I think we've brought the majority, not only of the people that work for us, but the majority of Missourians with us. And that's really hard to do when you look at a whole state. So I think we're really on the cusp of something pretty unique here.
Were there also cost savings associated with these changes?
Yes. Oh, we had to. We've We've reduced. We've taken a $5 million cut in extension in terms of our state funding in the 2 years I've been here. I thought when I came to the University of Missouri after being at NC State for many years and seeing some reductions here and there that y'all might give me a break. I see that you didn't do that. We had to reduce $5 million, 3.5 the first year, 1.5 the second year. We did that for the most part with very little impact on our outstate reach. And that's been hard. So most of that was internally, and it was about reorganizing how you do work and processes. And it really has, I think, strengthened us and made us better. People have to communicate more. One thing is you can't be siloed as much. You have to interact with one another. And we're still working through that. I don't want to tell you it's perfect. It's not. But I do think people have clarity where they're going to go. They understand processes now. And I think we're going to be in a much better place 3 and 4 years down the road. And the good thing for me is I think 25 years down the road, somebody's going to look back and say, I'm really glad they did what they did because they put us in a place just like somebody 50 years ago did what they did to organize extension the way they did, which was really good in 1960 and 70. We're now getting a chance to reset that for that next generation of leaders. And to me, that's pretty fulfilling.
Dean LaBoa, same 2 questions for you, really.
Yeah, I'll start off.
Can I have a question? So when I was going through my father's papers, I came across a certificate on how to grow black walnut trees. And we had a family farm, and he planted a bunch of black walnut trees, which is now part of the sink fuel compound. So they benefited from, that may not have been a stackable certificate as we're now talking about it, but how important, you had e-learning up here, how important is your extension and outreach to reaching all the Missourians, like those farmers that may want to grow trees? And to what extent are you and are we being involved, and how important is the extension of broadband into unserved parts of Missouri? Could you just spend 60 seconds on that?
First part is, what you're really talking about is non-formal education. It's not the formal side of going in the classroom, but it's where you spread information out, which is classic extension. We're going to continue to do that. In fact, our agricultural FTE across the state is actually up. There's going to be more people working in ag. I know Darrell Chapman will be glad to hear me say that, across the state than there were before, but it's going to be, again, more targeted in areas that we need to be working in. So we're really been I've really appreciated that. So that non-formal piece is really going to be there. We're going to continue to be strong in that. And the digital platform is going to allow us to push it out faster. Now, the holdback on that is the second part of your question is broadband. We know that a large percentage, in particular in rural Missouri, don't have access yet. However, there's been some real movement in that. We have helped with a coalition of others, including the Department of Agriculture, the Farm Bureau, and many others, Department of Economic Development, the Governor's Office, to establish a state broadband office, which is now established in the state of Missouri and now is beginning to move and coordinate that work. So that's been a really good outcome of where the university has been involved in that. I've been sort of your rep, but there's been a lot of people involved in that. A second piece of that is because of that office, there's been new federal money coming in and new sources of money coming in. There was an announcement made this week about USDA and healthcare, and where they're putting some monies in certain healthcare enterprises to extend healthcare out through broadband. So there's going to be a lot there. So the corner of your question is, are we going to continue to do that? Yes, but we're going to do it better. We're going to have it available not only in face-to-face, but also in terms of digital platform. But we got to, again, continue to work on the digital platform so people can get to it. So there's a lot of levers in that, John, as we think through that. But I think that gets to what you were talking about.
Great to hear the progress we're making. Thanks.
Dean LeBoa, I'm wondering that if the changes that you've made, do you find that they have improved your ability to do what you need to do, or have they created additional hardships?
So honestly, it's both. From the standpoint of the processes, it's so much improved. We have complete accountability, integrity. We know everything at all times with respect to how our college is running. We're always working to best serve the students. I say the students are really excited with the changes they've seen because we optimized what we did with the available funds we had. We were able to launch a new engineering leadership engagement and career development academy. So we have 7 very clear strategic priorities in our 5-year strategic plan that are moving us up in all the metrics that are of critical importance both to the college and to the campus. It's hard. So all that being said, workload policies and enacting those and those were hard. That took a long time, and I think, we have a good portion of faculty who are really happy. We have some that are not, and it's constant dialogue that I need to do and the chairs need to do. We need to make sure that we are always sharing all the data about why we're doing what we're doing. But from the standpoint of really looking at data-driven practices and data-driven metrics and best practice approaches, the answer is a clear yes. It's hugely improved. Your question with respect to budget, we actually did all this with a budget cut of over 25%. So when I first came in, we did an internal audit of the college and a efficiency and efficacy analysis. We implemented every single recommendation in the efficiency and efficacy analysis and everything we learned from the internal audit. We knew budget cuts were coming. I mean, we had been given enough information. We could see where the metrics were going. So we actually worked proactively to cut more out of our budget than we knew we had to for that year. So now we are in a mode of revenue generation. We're growing the college and very focused on, Like I said, we do a strategy-driven budget, so we have specific incentive models that we provide for our faculty to be excited to do hybrid approaches or online approaches, to grow our research expenditures, to, the way we do merit-based raises are very clearly aligned with our strategic goals and that of the campus. So the processes are much better. But for me to just tell you, yes, it's sunshine and unicorns, no, it's still hard. We still have work to do. But we will, when we get to the end of this, I think there will be the end of that rainbow. But my faculty and staff and students, they are exceptional. I say this all the time since I first came here. We do not blow our own horn enough. I was so thrilled that we're blowing our horn a lot about George Smith, and I think we got even more George Smiths in our campuses that we will be finding out about, but we need to highlight the incredible work of what they do, and we also need to talk about that it's hard. We're doing these huge changes in times of diminished resources, so I can't thank them enough and my team enough. We're going to continue to do some more things, but it's not easy. It's not easy.
No, change isn't easy, but I want to congratulate both of you and applaud both of you and your teams for being able to meet such a burdensome challenge and find the silver lining out of it, and really modernize the way that you are delivering the services that you're delivering to the students and to the state. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. If I might, and I think that's good, Marshall and Dean, just because we got to keep marching. If I might, because I think it's important as we're talking about transformation, I would like to address this to each of the chancellors. And Molly, since you're on my right, I'm going to start with you. What do you feel, how do you feel about the proposed changes in the selection of department chairs?
I'm in strong, is this on? I'm in strong agreement with that. That's what I was used to. I was a little surprised that we were doing things differently here. We should always look for talent, new talent from outside, because it brings with it new ideas. And I think cross-fertilization across the nation, not just across Missouri, but across the nation, will only help us get better. That doesn't stop internal candidates from competing, but they get to compete at the national level there. And if they win it, well, they have much more credibility inside the institution because they competed with everybody else. So I'm all for making that change where we look for the best talent that there is for any position, senior level position within the university.
And do you agree with holding the deans responsible and accountable for the selection?
The deans should be the appointing authority for the department chairs. And the department chair is actually a very important position. It's a very hard work, let me say that. The department chair's work is very hard work. But they also are the point where transformation starts across the institution. It's the department chair's position that will start that. So it's very important that the deans are held accountable, but also given the flexibility and the responsibility for appointing the department chairs.
Alex?
I agree with everything Molly said. I would add that it's hard because that's where it's most personal. You're interacting with faculty directly at that stage. In terms of recruiting and getting the best talent, there are times when we do have outstanding talent within the department and would like to promote them and keep them moving along the track in terms of building the administrative talent that we need for the whole institution. So also considering outstanding people internally is something we want to do.
And again, do you agree with holding the deans accountable?
Absolutely.
Chancellor George?
Well, let me say I'm very glad that the president has addressed this issue. The department chair, I think, is perhaps may be the most difficult administrative position in the university. I never was one. I mean, I skipped it because I didn't think I could do it. No. I mean, you're accountable. You live with your decisions every day. Students and faculty and staff, you're accountable to the upper administration. All chairs now have to do fundraising as well. I mean, it's, the portfolio for a department chair looks like it was for a president or a chancellor 20, 30 years ago. So I certainly support the notion that it's not a popularity contest to find the next chair. It's something done in partnership with the dean, the provost, and the chancellor. And so I applaud this fresh approach for our system at this. Thank you.
Chris, and the reason there's a reason I started with Molly and went to the left, because it's actually, the proposed changes are the biggest for the way Missouri S&T does things, so.
Yeah, bring them. We're totally in support of this. And I was a department chair, and this is the kind of thing that I'm used to. National search, come in, report to the dean, work that ground between faculty and administration, and do both as a faculty member and as an administrator. It's an important aspect of that, and the dean should be responsible.
And do you agree it's not a popularity contest among the faculty, or should not be?
No.
Mr. Chairman, could I make one more comment? I do agree with Alex that there may be times when we do have some very strong internal candidates, and for whatever reason, for retention or other reasons, we might want to promote them. So the dean should also have the flexibility to make that decision. So their hands shouldn't be tied that every time they have to do an external search. In exceptional circumstances, with the permission of the provost, they should be able to appoint somebody internally. But that should be the exception.
Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And can I add one other thing to that, too, is that while it's not a popularity contest, I do think it's important that the deans work with their faculty and their department if they're going with an internal candidate, just to make sure they get feedback on each candidate they're considering.
Yeah, and I was going to say, even though it should not be a popularity contest, there should be, that putting together a selection committee and getting input from various constituents is a really important aspect of this, because this will be their person's department chair.
Great. Thank you all very much. You've got.
All right, Ryan Rapp, Rick.
I've just got a few comments, and then we'll get started with Rick's presentation. I think as you've listened today, you've heard different stories about transformation across the organization. You think about many of the different initiatives that we have underway, whether it's e-learning, administrative transformation, rethinking our research agenda. All of those really cause us to think about how do we drive transformation at scale. So I think we heard really good examples from both Dean LeBoa and Marshall Stewart. But how do we go about doing that across the organization? And I just offer to the board, from our viewpoint, alignment, prioritization, and planning around those different initiatives is really just as important as the execution of those individual projects. And that's one of the reasons we formed the Transformation Office, is really to help us drive this at scale. But I'd also offer transformation is not just the job of that office. So it's not one person, it's not one office. We all as leaders have to embrace it, align around it, and drive towards it. But I do think there's a lot that this approach can offer, and I'll turn it over to Rick, and he can give you guys an update on how we've structured the office.
And if you might, Rick, because you are this university's first ever Chief Transformation Officer, would you also just briefly, because I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but tell the board and the university family a few of your qualifications and experience in actually performing transformational change.
Okay. Reluctantly, I will.
I knew you wouldn't talk about yourself if not forced to.
Okay, so I spent a career outside of academia. I've been here for about 2 years, and probably in the last third of my career, I was, although a financial executive, I really I was on projects the whole time that really involved transformation, growing of organizations, consolidation of business units. So I have been down this road before. It doesn't mean I know all the answers, but I do know things that really can cause projects to fail. Excuse me. So I've tried to build that into this presentation, and you'll see as I talk a little bit about what I want to stress. I recognize the urgency of transformation and the speed that we want to accomplish it, but I also fall back to some lessons learned that if we don't plan for it properly and we aren't all aligned and we don't try to take everybody along with us, it'll fail. So I think there's a sweet spot in the middle there that you have to balance that, and that's what I'm going to try to achieve in this office. So without much introduction, I started out, when I heard I was going to speak, I started with a very core, short message, and I really just wanted to express what I believed my roles my role in this position and my responsibilities are, and then how we would execute it. And as I started talking to all of my peers, it kept growing and growing, and the more I speak, the more boring it gets. So the good news is we're back to just the core message. But I think it's the right message for this meeting, and that's for you just to understand the approach I want to take as I get started as the CTO. So I think what you heard from Marshall just now and Dean LeBoa, it clearly shows that they get it. They understand what changes and the importance. If you rewind the tape for a couple of weeks when we were all back at the leadership conference that's been referenced many times that Drew put on, I think you could go around the room and I think you could see that of the senior leadership in the room, they got it. Elizabeth has her story for change. Marshall has his story for change. I have my story for change. I think we all had a story for change. But I think what is true is I think had we had a week instead of a day and a half to go through the room and speak to everybody, I think everybody would have had their own story. And in some ways, it would have been speaking about their own microcosm. Some would have said, yeah, let's talk about change at the whole university. And it made me realize, as I was sitting there trying to understand, what Drew was telling us, that the big part of my role, as I saw it then, was going to be to take all of those change stories and synchronize them into something that gave us this global picture for transformation and where we really need to go, not in many incremental steps, but really what is the long-term goal that we can all focus on, and we can all figure out what are the few big steps that we need to get there. And when we define what those big steps are, then we're going to find all of the incremental steps that we need to get to each one of those milestones. But that alignment, I think, is really key, and it's really important. As I was preparing for this, that was what I thought my message was. And one of my colleagues kind of reminded me, and it was really true, that the people that I've been hanging around with since I found I've been going to be doing this job, and the discussions I've been having have been mostly senior leadership. So when I had jumped to the conclusion that, well, almost all of us recognize the need for change, I was reminded, and it's really very true, that as you work down in the organization, that isn't universally accepted. And it's not a function of rank, it's really a function of what people see when they do their day-to-day job. Everybody doesn't interact regularly with the legislature. Everybody doesn't see the competitive forces in the market. I think the trick is going to be to use those that have a strong desire to change, and then to get to the people that don't and convince them that we'd like them to, or if not, we need to at least have them accept it, so that we can all go down the road together. So how am I going to do that? So on the next chart, please. This is what I think my responsibilities of my office are. As I just said, I think it's really to develop a culture of transformation throughout the university and get us all aligned and get us to a common place. I want people not thinking about this is what we need to do for my area, or this is an IT tool that would be nice to have, but really what does transformation for the big university look like? We need to implement the transformation project portfolio, and that's something that I'm going to spend the next couple of charts developing, but it's an idea that I'd like you to embrace. We need to manage transformation as a program. So I'd like to bring it up a level, and I'd like to not look at individual projects and say every project needs a plan and a sequence, but I'd like to say the portfolio does. We need to, as a leadership team, as a university, all members really have to understand what the meaning is of the entire portfolio. What's our vision? How do we stay aligned? There's a sequence for how we're going to have to work through these projects, and then there'll be an accountability model where those that are in charge are going to have to be held accountable for what they commit to. Maybe the most important thing on the chart is the fourth bullet, and that's I'd like to develop an operating rhythm among project leaders and all members of leadership. And that's not one thing. That's a series of what I consider a series of meetings. It sounds very tactical, but I don't think it really is. And I think it's getting the right groups of people together to give regular updates and communication about what we're doing, what our commitments are, the progress we're making, the changes that are going on in projects. Requirements change and evolve, and as they do, they're going to affect all of the other projects that evolve with them. So, and then finally, I'm also going to be the program leader, the project leader, as President Choi said earlier, for Project Unify and non-discretionary spend. Okay, so when I talk about the transformation portfolio, just in an abstract term, this is what I'm talking about. It's going to be a collection of projects, but it's all going to be viewed as a single project, a single program. In there are immediate needs, and those are things, I'm going to plug the names in and you'll recognize them. They're things that we need to focus on right now that have been identified as priorities, and we're going to hit those first and hard. But then there'll be more. There'll be a next layer, and then there's going to be a future layer of projects rolled out. And the combination of all of these things are going to get us to the long-term place that we need to get to. Okay, on the next chart, how am I going to do it? I think these are the goals. These are the goals for my work statement. One is to build that common vision for change and for the future state. And that when I say future state, I'm really talking about some long-term end state. We'll always be changing. When we get there, there'll be a need to change again, but we need to find a spot and focus on it and identify what we're going to have to do to get there. Communication and fact gathering with the faculty and the staff and really everybody at the university. We can't do it just with a small group of us. We all need to go together, and that means listening to views and opinions, incorporating them into fact patterns, and then making informed decisions based on the data that we get. When we do, get alignment among the leadership team. As leaders, we have to recognize that every project in this black box is important. We might not like them all, but we need to understand that they're all important. They've been accepted. They have a purpose. And for the ones that we don't personally believe in, we still have to support. For the sake of all those projects surrounding them, if for no other reason, but there's more. Projects need to be prioritized by requirement and need date. We tend to prioritize projects based on what we want to see now, but things have a very definite sequence. There's some things that we need to do before others. They're not necessarily all the glamorous projects, but it's the groundwork that needs to be done. We need to recognize it, find it, and do that. It's also really important, and I think this is another key thing to this role, is to recognize the interdependence among these projects. If we took every box, every one of these colored boxes, and assigned it to someone and let them go out and complete it, and then come back at the end of the day and just expected them all to play together, we'd have to be very good or very lucky. So I think that the idea of recognizing this interdependence, and it gets back to the operating rhythm we want to establish, this regular interaction among leaders as a team to understand how these projects are progressing and how they change and what's important. I think that's a fundamental tenet of this position. And then finally, just use program management best practices to manage it. Hold people accountable at the end of the day for what they commit to. All right, so I'm not going to create a big organization to do this. I have a joint appointment myself. I anticipate needing the help of 3 or 4 people, probably also with joint appointments, but it'll be very lean. Projects are going to be accomplished using the functional experts that exist and reside in the university right now. An example, one of the 4 projects you'll see is the online education initiative. Steve Graham is the expert in that area. He's leading that, and he's chartered for completing that. I'm responsible for making sure that it integrates with all the other programs, with all the other projects in this transformation program. Steve's responsible for leading online education. So on the next chart, this is the portfolio as it's been defined right now. There'll be more. Next chart, please. There'll be more. This really reflects the immediate need, but I expect them to continue. I'm going to go a little bit deeper on one project today, and that's on Project Unify, and you'll see those slides in a minute. I'm going a little deeper on that, not just so you see what that project is, but I'm going to manage all projects the same way. So what you'll start to see is the template that we're going to lay out to manage projects. So that when I come before you to talk about transformation, or President Choi or the chancellors, we'll have a very standard look and feel for projects so we don't have to relearn the way that they work. We're going to watch and measure common characteristics. So the 4 projects are Project Unify, which we'll talk about, non-labor discretionary spend, one that's very important to all of us. The key characteristic about this project is it can immediately spin cash for us to finance some other projects or just to put back into research in academics. So the short-term value of that program makes it one that we want to do immediately. You've heard about Next Generation Online. I'm not going to do it again. In administrative transformation, you've been watching this for a year. So there's a lot of progress that's been made so far on the finance, the HR, the IT landscape. Maybe the next spot for this when we speak again is really going to be working on what the very long-term vision of administrative transformation is. So far, there's a lot of shorter-term projects that have been rolled out and we've had accomplishments. We haven't really talked as much about, well, how do you eventually get to something that might be an integrated shared services kind of an organization, where we're eliminating things that we do 4 times and just do them once. And then on the other end of the spectrum, recognizing there's very good reason to do some things 4 times and we need to do those. Something with a strategic value has to stay decentralized. Something more transactional can be centralized. So that might be a piece of that story we look at. It also could be that there are a lot of areas of administrative that apply to the university, and they're not just in finance, HR, and IT. We have very administrative functions in enrollment management. Maybe that should be in there. Maybe it shouldn't. But I think those are things that we've got to explore, and I think that's what we'll do over time with this portfolio. Okay, so quickly, I want to take you through Project Unify. So in the next chart, again, watch for structure as much as anything, because you've seen these called out before. So the goal of Unify is to create the seamless student experience. As President Choi said, we want to streamline business processes and we want to move to something that's very easy and painless for students to use. Eventually, not part of this 12-month milestone, but eventually we want to move toward a single instance for PeopleSoft and for all of these applications that support it. The last count I had, there's like 259 applications that support the student system that aren't part of the core student ERP system. So that's a big job. The next chart, you can see this is the scope. So when I say there's a sequence for everything, if you look at what it would take to upgrade the IT instance, you want to jump down to 3. And you want to say, well, obviously the goal here is to provide a common, efficient, and effective tool for everybody to use. But really, when you recognize that IT is just an automation layer that rests on top of the way the business operates, you really need to look at the way the business operates. And that's the first bullet. We need to, if we're going to have a seamless experience across 4 campuses, well, we need to make sure we're doing things the same way, and we're not. And this isn't a new idea. The team has been working on this, and there's a set of processes that I'll tell you about in a minute in the deliverables section, but there's a set of processes that they've made a lot of progress on. And then finally, the second bullet is an important one too, and it's not one that we recognize very often, but it's one on governance of IT. So we can't be out fixing IT and trying to drive toward a single instance of IT if we have organizations who all have their own decision-making authority on what they're going to incorporate into IT tools or changes they're going to make to IT tools. We're going to be fixing one side of the equation at the same time the other side of the equation is changing or growing. So that governance it's not a glamorous piece, but it's something that needs to be done. So when you look at these 3 things together, sequentially what has to be done over a period of 12 months is really big. Now, we'll do it, but again, it's just this idea of really understanding where we're going to go in the long term and then carving back to get there. Okay, so on the next chart, every project we look at is going to have a set of committed to deliverables. I think it's important that we get these things into writing, we make commitments on them, and then we all hold each other accountable for them. There'll be many schedules, many levels of schedules involved, and by the time you execute a project, you'll be on a very detailed level of scheduling. But I think this high level, these waypoints that we can all agree on are critical. I won't go into exactly what these are. Okay, on the next chart, as I've sat in the crowd for the last 2 years, I've listened to the need and desire to have a dashboard. I can't think of a better thing to have a dashboard on other than transformation as a whole. I don't think you really want to review projects on a regular basis, and we probably shouldn't at many levels of the organization, but we do need to have a page that we can look at with a set of gauges and dashes and dials and charts that we can say, hey, this is working well or it's not, or it's gotten better since I've seen it last, or it's gotten worse since the last time I've seen it. That dashboard is going to be made up of the metrics of each one of these individual projects. So these may or may not be the metrics the next time you see me. This is kind of where we are right now. But for example, for Unify, we might look at the total number of uncommon apps. If we have 259 applications for student systems, and many of them are in there 4 times, one for each campus, well, that 259 maybe should be 159. So we're going to measure progress against how many uncommon instances we have. We might need a schedule completion metric, a burn down to common processes. Right now, I think there's about 45, 50 processes and work that we know we need to get groups to buy in on to change the way they do business. We might burn those down from 50 to 0 over the course of the next 12 months, and you can watch. And then we could measure enrollment, retention, and graduation rates if we want to drive a little higher. On the next chart, another attribute of these programs we're going to watch are going to be risks. We need to understand what the risks are early and address them early to keep us from failing. In this case, for Unify, I have 2 already. Number one is I don't think that there's anyone at the leadership level, again, that doesn't understand that we need to drive to more commonality. But it's difficult. It's difficult to have faith to say, if I let go of the way I do things, somebody's going to be there to catch it and to make sure I have something that works for me if I let this go. That's the trust piece we got to build up, but we've got to get people to let go because we can't get things to a single instance when we do things 4 ways. My other concern on the program is I think that there's a significant question about whether we have enough resources and staffing, but we're gonna watch that and see if we do. The final thing that I look at is help needed. And probably the one question I got in the reviews of this presentation more than any is, why do we have something on there that we don't need any help at? And it's because I want to create habits. And for these programs, I want to drive the culture that says, if we need help, we're going to ask for help. And if we don't need help, great, but we're going to state that too. So if I come to you in 2 months and say, well, I had big problems on this for the last 6 months, you can tell me I didn't because I didn't ask for any help at this meeting. Okay? All right, so finally I'll conclude. This is what I'm going to do over the next 30 days. I'm going to identify leads for new projects and begin filling team rosters where we need to. Some of the projects are very mature. The administrative transformation, that's staffed. Some of the projects aren't. The non-labor discretionary costs, I have a few names from the CFOs of who might work that, and that's how far we are on that one. So we'll get those rosters filled. The program deck that I just showed you, we'll have one of those for everything that's in the portfolio. We'll make sure that we know not only what we're working on now, but what is the end point? What are we working to? What does this mean to the future state? I am going to work hard to develop that operating rhythm. So for the leaders in the room, I'll be contacting you, and there'll be different groups that meet. I think the most significant group we'll meet, though, will be the project leaders from all of the groups sitting at the same table once a week, once every 2, once a month, whatever it is, but briefing on what's going on their project and how that affects everybody else, something we probably don't do well right now. We'll develop the program and project dashboards. I think I need to start to communicate from this office. I haven't really done that yet, and that needs to be done. And then I'll be working on the general deliverables that I just described to you. So that is all I've prepared.
Any questions, comments? Yes, sir. Curator Phillips.
Yeah, I've saved one. I heard you early in your presentation talk about having these projects generate, I'm not sure what term you use, but at least in healthcare you'd call it positive operating margin. In industry you'd call it profit.
Mm-hmm.
And you could fold that back in. Are there some projects where you can't expect near-term gain? And I would say, like the TPMC, that's even after building it, you're not going to see immediate dividends from an income stream. That's the question, and I'm going to then turn it back to e-learning. because that's another project you have on your table. Is that more like the TPMC where you have to build it and have it operational before you can see the income stream? Is building a new e-learning methodology and staffing it and having it supported with the coaches something that it may take a year or two to see positive income stream from? Not income, but over the costs that we have to put into it.
Yeah, so if I miss some of this, come back and ask me again. But I think you caught my point perfectly, though. Where I started out with is some of these projects are going to generate savings or generate cash or generate margin and generate them very quickly. If we make a change to non-discretionary costs in the fiscal year 19 budget, we still have half of fiscal year 19 left, so I can get half of a fiscal year of savings out of that. That's quick. Some of these things aren't. Some are very long-term. So I think every project really is going to have its own investment and its own return curve. Some of them are very long, and some of them may not return at all. Some may you just do for strategic reasons. But I think something that I try to be careful of, and I might caution this as well, is I think the real value. So when you listen to what Marshall did, that has value on an individual basis. And when you listen to what Dean LeBoa did, that has value on an individual basis. I think what you're asking me to do is to take it to the next level and generate a higher level of value based on all of these programs contributing and working together. So in other words, if we can take the university from where we are right now to a very different place 10 years from now and really affect the product that we offer and our place in the market and our competitive position and the quality of our program and add research and be able to focus on building tenured faculty, you could probably go in and measure a bunch of individual contributions from that, but I think the real value is where you go in taking all of that in a synchronized manner together. Now, that doesn't answer your question on e-learning directly, and I know that, and I probably don't know the answer right now, but it's not going to happen immediately because I think there will be this stage where we're going to have, well, first of all, I don't think Steve knows exactly what the future state of that looks like. But when it does, there's going to be alternatives that says if we stay in a very distributed four-university state and improve those individually, that probably would have a quicker return than if we would go to some combined higher level organizational structure. But I think really the question is, if you look at it at perpetuity, if you look at the future value of the deal as you compress it through time, you might not be better off taking the short-term gain. You might be better off really working for the long term and making sure that you're doing what's best for the eventual goal. Does that make sense?
So that was a very thoughtful answer. It wasn't a yes or no question. But what I wanted to draw out was that for each project, we don't want to create unrealistic expectations for early returns. Some there will be, but some of the more urgent ones, and I would say TPMC and e-learning are urgent, but not short-term returns probably.
Yes, sir. And I think I'd just go back one last time and I'd say, I think probably the reason that we're doing most of these isn't for the financial return, but it's for the strategic importance of the project.
With respect to those two projects, I'd submit that we do that for survival.
Any other questions or comments for Rick?
Rick, just a real quick question. You correctly identified that you're going to deal with some risk as you carry out your responsibilities in connection with this transformation. And one of the risks you mentioned was making sure leadership throughout is aligned as to vision. How are you going to go about that?
Well, let's see. Probably the uncomfortable answer in the very near term is we're going to get one. I don't know. I think everybody has an idea where we're going to go, but together I think we have some room to go to get there. And I think it requires, before we just get there, I think that we have some listening to do. I think we need to talk to, we need to talk through the organization, and we need to make sure that we're getting the ideas that we need. But then once we get that vision, that we're going to figure out we know who's accountable for developing it and for approving it, then we're going to get alignment. And the message, again, is going to be, if you like this, that's great. If you don't like this, we need you to at least like it well enough that you'll accept it and support it. So I don't think it's an immediate answer, Marcy, but I think there's some work to do there, but we know what we have to do.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Choi, you have a question?
Yes, Rick, thank you very much. I want to say for Project Unified that we are in the state to launch this because of the excellent work of Liz LaPointe, Julie Brand, Ben Callis, as well as Gary Allen. This is a very important project that will really define how we collaborate as a system of 4 public universities. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Choi, or President Choi, that was, I thought, a very good presentation. And now, to the last order of business of the public session, I would remind members of the board that following the press conference immediately after the public session, we have a very substantive and important closed session. And the next order of business is election of the Board of Curators chairperson for 2019. Nominations are now in order.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a nomination. May I say a few words before I make that nomination? As a student athlete at Mizzou, there were several former lettermen that all of us wanted to emulate. I've had the honor to serve with 2 of those individuals on this board, Phil Snowden and John Sunvolt. Both of these guys were excellent student athletes. They still look pretty good, by the way. Yes.
Curator Chapman, could you pull that closer?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's being live streamed.
Yep. But most of all, these guys are good men with integrity that I still look up to as role models, by the way. So when I officially met John with my children, I was honored to have them take a picture with John. Do you remember that last summer? Yeah. And so I'm still a big fan of both these guys. But I believe that John would be a great leader for our board and the UM system. So what I'd like to do is make a motion. It's with great honor that I make this motion to nominate Curator John Sunvolt as chair for the UM System Board of Curators for 2019. Do I have a second?
Any second? Seconds are in order.
Mr. Chairman, if I could have the floor, I'd like to say that I've watched John Sunvolt as a student, as an athlete in his career and beyond. I've watched him develop as a businessman, color man. I've watched him on this board. He's smart, intelligent. He's a skilled curator. And as a senior curator letterman, I would like to nominate, or like to second the nomination of the junior curator letterman, John Sunvolt, to be the next president of the Board of Curators of the University of Missouri for 2019.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for John Sunvolt to serve as chairperson of the UM System Board of Curators for 2019. Are there any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, Cindy, call the roll. This is for to elect John Sunvolt, Curator John Sunvolt, as the chairperson for the year 2019.
Curator Burnsick? Yes. Curator Chapman?
Yes.
Curator Farmer?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Lehman?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Sunvolt?
Abstain. Yes.
And because of the Curator Sunvolt made his difficult decision to vote, it is a unanimous vote for John Sunvolt to be chairperson. Now nominations are now in order to elect the Board of Curators vice chairperson for 2019. Do I hear any nominations?
Mr. Chairman, it is my pleasure and certainly my distinct honor to nominate a member of our board to serve during 2019 as vice chair of our Board of Curators. As demonstrated today earlier, this member of our board always asks perceptive questions. Not only asks perceptive questions, but also is a good listener. She's a valuable member of our board, and this past year has done a terrific job as chair of one of our most important committees, the Finance Committee. So I am very, very happy to nominate my good friend, our outstanding curator, Julia Bernsick, as vice chair of the Board of Curators of the University of Missouri.
You heard the nomination. Are there any seconds? Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to second that nomination. I would very much like to see Julie Brunchick serve as our vice chair for this Board of Curators for 2019. I think that a lot of this movement that has been going on across this university has been greatly propelled by Julia coming in and stepping up to a lot of roles. And so I'm very happy to serve with her, so I'd like to second that nomination.
I have heard a nomination and a second for Curator Julia Bernsick to serve as Vice Chairperson of the Board of Curators for 2019. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, Cindy, please call the roll.
Curator Bernsick?
Yes, thank you.
Curator Chapman?
Yes.
Curator Farmer?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Lehman?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes?
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Sunvold?
Yes.
All votes in favor.
Thank you. We have elected a chairperson and a vice chairperson for 2019.
Well, first of all, thank you. But for this minute, I want to honor David Steelman with a gavel. You know, when Chairman Steelman calls my office the quiet country lawyer that he is, my secretary always says, "Why do you put him on speakerphone?" And I calmly reply, "He's never been on speakerphone." I will say this about when people ask me about David Steelman. I think back of an old term called a statesman, someone that you think of that honors the state, honors where he's from, takes care of the people who he represents, and he has stepped up as a curator 4 years? 5 years, and in this past year, really expanded what Chairman Marcy Graham had started with this current board. So I thank you for your service. We look forward to having you on the board another year. I do know that I do have a nickname for him. I call him the Maverick. As a chairman, I think he was less maverick. I now expect, as I sit in the chair seat, he'll be more maverick.
John, thank you very much. I did notice that you said an old term statesman. So, you know, one of the traditions that we have, and despite the fact that we're talking about transformation, I think it's good to look at some of these traditions. And this book is a history of the University of Missouri from 1839 to 1939. And it is traditional for the outgoing chair to sign the book and then to pass it on for keeping for a year to the new chairman. And I'm very happy to be able to do so. It is also traditional that we read from the book. The book has a lot of history in it, but the interesting chapter to me, and I think Chairman Graham picked the same chapter for obvious reasons, is the last chapter in the book is called The Future. It was written by Frederick Middlebush when he was president. And what I want to read from it is he gives 5 principles for all of us to think about as we're going forward and changing. And instead of reading the whole paragraphs, I'm going to read just the first line of the first 4 and then end with the last one. The first principle is that there never should be any compromise in the quality of the university's personnel or its work. The second principle, in the next paragraph, The second principle is in the nature of an obligation of the university to the individual citizen. The third principle is closely related to the second. It has guided and always should guide higher education in America. I refer to the obligation of the university to serve and support our democratic institutions to the utmost of its power. The fourth principle I shall name uniquely belongs to our own university. I refer to the direct obligation of the University of Missouri to the state of Missouri, which brought it into being, fosters its continued existence, and upon which its future depends. And finally, I'm going to read a little more on this. A fifth guiding principle in the development of the university, if it is to continue, in fact, to be a true university, is embodied in the word freedom. If a university is to fulfill the high obligations which I have reviewed, it must be free from the spirit of intolerance, bigotry, and undue influence from whatever source. This does not mean that the university should not be subject to any regulation. It does mean, however, that the nature and degree of such regulation should always be considered in light of the true purpose of a university. There can be no rights exercised in human society without the assumption of the corresponding duties. It is only through a wholesome and consistent respect for these duties that the university can command the respect and esteem from which flows the possibility of freedom so necessary to the university's very life. And it is a real honor. John, I have known you for a little while. We've played golf together, which gives you a little window into the character of another human being. But I know that it is in good hands, and it's an honor for me to hand that to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Steelman. I'll protect this. I have to. My kids will wonder why it's, what is it? Because we just read iPads anymore. So, just a quick couple words. This morning, Chairman Steelman came up with a path of excellence that you go through the pages and you think of every school here, every university that we have within the system, and what we've done. I, as a stakeholder, would also sit on one side, and I've had two kids graduate from Mizzou, and I would look at the board and say, are they on the path of excellence? And I grew up playing sports. I've been part of teams my whole life, some good, some bad. I now broadcast for the SEC and the ESPN. I was at Kentucky Wednesday night, the gold standard of teams in basketball. So I've seen good teams. Individuals on teams all have talents. The best teams understand their strengths, individually understand their strengths. The best teams collectively understand their strengths. They also understand their weaknesses, person by person and as a group. I will say this about this group, and again, it started with Chairman Graham 2 years ago because this group was together. The root system, and it continued with Chairman Steelman, the root system of this group with all the talent that we have. Yes, strengths across the board. Sometimes I'm in awe, but each one of us has a weakness. I often think a great reality show, and could make some money, is if we put a camera in when we get together in executive session. It would be quite interesting for you to see those things. But I will say this about this group, because they've been together. The system and the root system that started with Marcy and then with David is pretty deep. So no matter what happens, if the winds blow, if there's a storm now and then, and we know that'll happen, we know it's coming, this group can handle it. And I'm honored to be your chairman. I look forward to starting January 1st, and I do appreciate you having me here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Curator Sunvold. Anything else for the good and welfare of the board? Yes, sir. President Choi.
So it's my pleasure to work with Chairman Sunvold and Vice Chair Bernchick. This is my 19th month as the leader of the system, and you represent the third chairman and third vice chair, and they've all been outstanding, so I've been very lucky. I also want to say a few words about our departing chairman, David Steelman. As many of you know, he is a very considerate person. He would send me a text message at 5:30 and says, I need to talk to you, but no rush. 5:45, I get a text message saying the same thing. But that also goes towards his commitment to the university. He believes in the potential of this university to achieve excellence, and he works very hard to ensure that we are aligned to that vision. It's not always been easy, but I believe we are getting there. We made a lot of hard choices during the past 2 years under Marcy as well as David Steelman. But we have more work to do, so we look forward to working with you. One last thing about David is when the question is asked, who will stand up for the University of Missouri? When I say who will stand up for the University of Missouri, I mean for the faculty, students, and staff. David Steelman comes to mind. So thank you very much for your service. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. It really has been an interesting year for everybody. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? The public session is adjourned. We will continue in closed session. Thank you all very much.